During the spring of 1993, in Kadema, Israel, a small coastal town between Tel Aviv and Haifa, 3 women, unknown to each other, all reported similar alien visitations.
He was very tall. He was almost 3 meters tall.
He was a giant, very tall, with big eyes. His face was more oval-shaped. His eyes were shiny like a spotlight, glittering.
And all around, there were as if flickering lights, like that.
Before I could move, he disappeared.
Each of these encounters occurred on a Saturday, the Jewish Sabbath, and at the same exact time and in the same exact manner. And in each case, strange circles were left behind after the encounter.
The grass became, within a day, completely dry. It was before high as this grass all around, became completely dry, and eventually, after 2 or 3 days, lay down just like the way it's here.
Most recently, 2 years after the Kadema visits, the otherwise quiet town of Yatzitz is suddenly in a panic after village leader Herzl Cosentini reports a frightening encounter with an alien being. It is Friday evening at the beginning of the Jewish Sabbath.
I was visiting a friend whose name is Danny Azar. I was at his place at around 8:30. About 9:30, something passed by the house that caused shaking. It rattled the windows and doors. I was curious to find out what happened, so I opened the door. I saw something very strange. I was very scared by it. As soon as my friend saw it, he fell down because he was so scared.
And they didn't try to follow it. What they do is lock themselves in the room and call the police.
Doron Rotem is a horticulturist by trade, but for 20 years, he has also been one of Israel's most respected UFO investigators. Rotem interviewed Herzl and Danny the morning after their encounter. He discovered that the men reported a creature very similar to that reported by the women of Kadema.
It's hard for me to describe its face because the face was projecting something. I don't know whether it was heat or blinding light, but I do remember that its face was glowing intensely. It had like 2 eyes, then something around the head that was blinding. It looked like a human being, 3 to 3.5 meters tall, perhaps 1.5 meters wide. I estimate its weight at half a ton.
In the field where the men claimed to have seen the creature, there was no crop circle, but a calling card of a different kind. Strange footprints, unlike any the 2 farmers had ever seen before.
I was scared, and I am not one to get scared at all. I was in the combat unit in the army. I was a driver in the Sinai Desert. But when I saw the footprints here, I got scared.
The tracks that were left behind by the strange being Herzl and Danny insist was here have confounded Israeli police and the professional tracker who was called in to analyze the prints.
The tracker was amazed to find an 8-kilometer trail to the nearest village. He says he never saw such tracks before, and he claimed that any animal on an 8-kilometer trail would leave at least some feces on the ground, which never was found.
By measuring the distance between the unidentifiable footprints, investigators have estimated its stride to be approximately 50 inches, more than twice the length of an average human stride.
It has a huge front truck that's stuck into the ground to 35 centimeters, and then after it's stuck, a little feminine heel appeared in the back. It doesn't find on humans, it doesn't find on animals, so it indicates that there was something else over there.
Herzl Cosentini is a man who claims he has never believed in aliens or UFOs. But after his encounter, Herzl has had to re-examine his beliefs.
As of today, my curiosity is sparked, and I would be interested in taking a look at what it's all about. We were raising cows once, horses. We've seen everything. A thing like this, it's not a thing you see every day.
In the annals of modern UFO hotspots, Israel has been a blank page.
When I researched my book, the only public mention of UFOs that I found were from 1952, from Haifa. There were 2 sightings. That is all I could find until Shikmona.
Barry Chamish is an author and journalist who has written about a recent rash of UFO sightings and encounters that began suddenly in 1987.
This is on the evening of Rosh Hashanah in 1987. Ami Achrai is returning home from Tel Aviv, his home in Kiryat Bialik, near Haifa. There is a beach called Shikmona, just before the city of Haifa. He sees a red object fly into the air, hover, dip.
Underneath there was a red glowing spot about 1.5 meters in diameter. There were immense flashlights, and there was a very loud noise, a whirlpool, as if a helicopter was going to crash.
He stops his car, gets out of the car, sees the object return, and there is a huge flash.
It suddenly disappeared. Only a big red spot remained, and in a second, it leaped into the sky and vanished.
Ami was shaken by the inexplicable UFO encounter. He tried to put it behind him, to dismiss it as an asteroid or a comet, but something drew him back to the scene. And in the daylight, he found concrete remnants of his experience.
Imagine intense heat burning sand and vegetation in the shape of a UFO. Inscribed in the right-hand corner, a clear-cut picture of an astronaut in front of the dashboard.
Not only was there an indelible image in the sand, testing at the site revealed the ground itself had taken on unusual properties.
The land was 671% more magnetic than usual land.
At the request of sightings, soil samples were taken from the scorched earth at Shikmona Beach for a detailed analysis by biophysicist W.C. Levengood. His findings confirmed that the ground had new characteristics.
One was sort of astounded by the tremendous change in the ratios of the elements. For example, ordinary zinc was increased 104 times, whereas there are other elements stayed absolutely the same.
But that finding paled in comparison to what Dr. Levengood found while he was preparing to take a photomicrograph of the soil sample.
As I was adjusting the camera to get the photograph, to my astonishment, the soil appeared to be melting. What I found here was that there was a coating on the soil of a very low melting material. I have consulted with a geophysicist, and there is no explanation. This does not occur in nature. There's no natural way that this amount of hydrocarbon would be on the soil.
5 months after the Shikmona Beach sighting, just 1 mile away in the city of Haifa, Rosetta Kalfan and her family spotted bizarre lights in the sky. They were able to film the UFO with a home movie camera.
We were chatting, and suddenly my sister looked up towards the window and saw a glittering light in the air. I got up quickly, and we both rushed over to the window. I told her, "Do you know what that is? That is a UFO."
The light was golden, like nothing I've ever seen in my life. A real light beam radiating out from it. It was shocking, truly shocking.
There was a UFO that stayed there 17 minutes over the sea and then disappeared very quickly until it became small as a star.
You see windows, and this is possibly the most outstanding feature. And certainly in the film, you'll see that at the beginning, Rafi Malka is clever enough to get background. There's no mistaking this as part of the features of the hill or the Haifa area. It's not a natural feature, it's certainly dangling in the air. It moves, it has lights, and it was witnessed by experts. I believe that it was a tremendously documented UFO.
2 years later, in 1991, Yossi Ben Maas was leaving his real estate business in Haifa for his home in nearby Bet Shean. Suddenly, out of nowhere, he was nearly blinded by a brilliant shaft of light.
There was a huge sheet of light. It was right before my eyes. It was spectacular. It was a very calming light, but I was afraid it would go to Bet Shean, where my friends and family are. So all of a sudden, it changes course, as if it was reading my mind, a kind of telepathy between us.
Yossi immediately called the Bet Shean Police Department.
Chief of Police, Yitzchak Mordechai, is awoken at 3 in the morning, goes outside, sees an enormous object in the air.
It looked a little bit like a boomerang, but it was a shape that I never saw before. It had a unique power and color, a special glow which was very different from anything I saw before. I didn't know how to react.
He radios in to headquarters, calls the Air Force, says, "This is what I got."
They asked for the exact location of the object. I gave them the location, and they couldn't find the object on the radar.
Because of Bet Shean's close proximity to the Jordanian border, the Israeli Defense Forces sent 300 troops into the area to track the unidentified craft.
It was dragging a convoy of armed men for 3 hours on a trail up to the Jordanian border, which is a very sensitive place, but it seems to know where the Jordanian border is, and heads back. At 5:45 in the morning, in broad daylight, it disappeared in a flash.
Chamish has developed a controversial theory that these 3 UFO sightings are part of a pattern dating back to biblical times.
People who have been studying UFOs seriously around the world have reached the consensus that the Bible is a convincing UFO story. I came to the same conclusion that the Old Testament, from the pillar, the cloud that led the Hebrews out of Egypt, that glowed at night and stopped the Egyptians, all the way through the prophets, were, in fact, UFO related.
Chamish also believes that stories of alien abductions in Kadema, as reported previously on sightings, are also part of the centuries-old pattern.
Shikmona, they were announcing in black and white, "We are here." At Bet Shean, they're saying, "All right, now we've got 500-600 of you seeing us, and you can shoot at us if you want to." Kadema was stage 3, "We want to meet you."
And stage 4, according to Chamish, is foretold in a prophetic passage from the Bible.
From Kadema, they shall go up to Jerusalem. In other words, Kadema is the next hop towards the revelation of the UFOs in Jerusalem.
It started in 1987, when auto mechanic Amy Arai spotted a fiery UFO over Shikmona Beach near Tel Aviv. His encounter and the debris left behind are as famous in Israel as Roswell is in the U.S. For the next 6 years, reports of UFO sightings, crop circles, and livestock mutilations poured in from all over Israel. But then in 1993, the sightings suddenly stopped, until now.
In February of this year, 1996, the UFOs returned dramatically.
Barry Shamish is an Israeli journalist and UFO investigator who is researching the return of bizarre craft over the Holy Land.
There's no conspiracy, there's no plan, there's no plot. For some reason or another, there are craft over the skies of Israel.
Not everyone has accepted as fact the presence of unidentified craft over Israel. Photojournalist Yossi Alani was skeptical, even cynical, until he snapped this UFO hovering over the Tel Aviv skyline.
I don't believe in UFOs, absolutely. But I have to tell you that I know what the picture is. It was absolutely unusual object on this bloody on the sky. Absolutely.
As of this report, sightings over Israel are occurring almost nightly. This is home video taken by members of a Tel Aviv family who claim to have seen this same UFO 3 times.
I woke up in the middle of the night. Very strong light was shining on me. It was so bright, it woke me up. It was a big light in the middle of the sky.
My son came to our room and woke us up. He said, "Dad, ma'am, wake up and don't panic. There is a UFO outside in the sky." And we saw a very, very strong light, shiny light in the sky. At that moment, my wife said, let's shoot picture with our video.
By the time of the 3rd sighting, more than 100 people were gathered outside the Shua's apartment building with their own cameras to videotape what has become known as the balcony craft.
The shape of this orange balcony, for lack of a better word, is something like a skull. And there is a line in the middle dividing these 2 levels of what I think are vents. Now, the size of it I can only estimate, but you have a zoom 200 capturing 2 rows, perhaps 24 windows, I didn't count them. one can only guess that this was a very, very large ship to be captured with that camera.
In tense political times, the UFOs over Israel are particularly unsettling, and some biblical scholars are fueling the sinister nature of recent sightings.
You've got two schools of thought here. School of thought number one assumes that the angels of the Old Testament are returning, and this bodes very well for Israel. Thought number two, it's not the angels returning, it's the giants, the Anakim of the ancient scriptures returning. These were the enemies of God that he ordered Joshua, David to destroy, and that bodes very badly for Israel.
Searching the Old Testament for answers to the UFO question has been extremely controversial, but so far, academic researchers have offered little or no explanation for the Holy Land's newest UFO flap.